If you are anything like me, then some of your favorite memories, some of the experiences that you want to hold on to most happen when you are traveling and exploring somewhere new. Today, I want to share with you a peek inside my travel journal from a trip that I took actually a few years ago now to Olympic National Park. These are some of my favorite travel entries with some of the most creative elements I think I've ever incorporated into my journaling, and I can't wait to share them with you. So let's head to my desk and take a peek inside. Here we are with my travel journal, and this journal, if you're curious, is an Archer and Olive A5 notebook in a nice dot grid. And I've already filled this entire journal up, and you can see that I have quite a few adventures documented in this journal before we get to this trip, because this is actually the last travel experience that is documented in this journal. And I wanted to share this page with you first because this trip was actually a dual part experience in which we were in the Pacific Northwest exploring both Mount Rainier and Olympic National Park. And I actually already have an entire flip through video of all of my Mount Rainier entries, so I would encourage you to watch that video next. And today we are going to focus just on the Olympic part of this experience. But I wanted to share with you that I do always start with a cover page for a new travel experience in my travel journal. The main components of my cover page are typically the title of where we went, and then I always include a date, whether that's just the month and year, and then a photo that kind of summarizes the trip. And in this case, I summarized the dual aspect of this trip by creating this collage of Mount Rainier and Olympic National Park, two photos that I took as part of this experience. And I love the way that these photos ended up lining up. You can see that I arranged them so that the flowers in the Mount Rainier image are actually looking like they're a continuation of where the trees line up in the Olympic image. So I thought that was a really beautiful and fun collage to represent the trip as a whole. So we are going to skip over all of the Mount Rainier entries, get a little peek at them. But I will say you should go back and watch that video because I also include footage from the climb itself. We summited Mount Rainier, as you can see on this entry with all of the stats. It was a really epic experience, and if you watch that video, you'll be able to get a sense of it and really travel along the mountain with us. This entry marks the transition from Mount Rainier to Olympic National Park. So on August 15th, and you can see I used my letter stencil to create a nice big date title for this page, doing it in a vertical fashion, which is a fun and different touch. And I just noted that this was a travel day. Used a nice strip of washi for decoration, and then otherwise it's all stickers. And I do always like to pick up the National Park stamp stickers that are available in all US national parks. I think these are such a fun way to document your trip in your journaling. So if you are going to a national park in the US, look for these in the gift shops. So this is the one for Olympic that I used here in the corner. And then I did put a little image of our Airbnb where we ended up staying in Port Angeles. I also have a little strip from the receipt of the vehicle that we got as our rental because Ben was quite excited to drive a 4Runner. But perhaps my favorite part of this entry is actually the little doodle. And the idea here is simply if you're on any kind of road trip, you can mark point A and point B at different parts of the page. And then I like to just do a circle, as you can see here, of color. These are nice color swatches that match the colors in our August title. And then I did very simple little line doodles of a big mountain to represent Mount Rainier, and then more of a cascade of mountains with some different trees to represent going to Olympic. And then just do a fun little dotted line as if you're kind of weaving in and out on your journey in between, and put your titles for point A and point B. Really simple doodle that you can incorporate in your own travel journal when on a road trip. And then I have my journaling in the middle. I used my Tombos to color in these sections. And then for the writing, I used my Write-Tech in the vintage set. All of the items that I use are typically linked in my Amazon storefront, so I would encourage you to check that out in the description. When we flip the page, we have one side mostly focused on journaling, and then a photo collage of our first big adventure in Olympic National Park. So as you can see, I again have the date, this time just the date itself. And you can see I have a little chicken here because if you read the journaling, it talks about how we were able to visit some little chickens on the farm where our Airbnb was and actually collect some eggs for our breakfast.
Don't peck me. Y'all sound so angry.
And what's so great about creative journaling is I was able to remember that fact just by seeing the little chicken sticker on the page. I knew all of that without even having to read why I put that sticker there. And that really is the reason for incorporating creative elements, because it brings all of those memories to life in a different way. On this day, we went to Lake Crescent in Olympic National Park. So you can see I again used one of those great stamp stickers. And then on this side, I created a 5x7 collage using my Pick Collage app. I always use that app to create collages of my photos to keep them smaller for my journaling. Usually I am cutting them out and using them as individual photos, but in this case, I wanted to keep it as one collage of the experience as a whole. So you can see this is all photos of Lake Crescent, and we went to Mount Storm King. So doing a giant hike after having just summited Mount Rainier was pretty intense, but we made it through. And you might be able to tell that the title on this photo is actually one I added in the Pick Collage app. So definitely recommend doing that as well. I love adding in titles for my entries on top of my photos themselves. And then I do have a strip of washi tape along the side because this is a fold out element. And so I also have washi on the inside to help hold it down and create that nice hinge. And then on the inside, I have this postcard that I got at the park, this really beautiful little scene with the wildflowers and the mountains and the bears. And then that folds out as well. So this is like a double interactive element in which we then have a photo of the waterfall that we went to as part of this hike to Merrymere Falls. And then this, actually, this background, I don't know if any of you would recognize this. This actually came as one of those Amazon gift guides that they send to people's houses for free. And I really liked the image of the tree and the mushrooms. So I cut it out of the magazine and then was able to use it for the backing of the postcard. And here you can see I used some of my fun quote strips to write, "Always be on the lookout for the presence of wonder," which I really loved that quote for representing our explorations this day. And then I do have our entrance fee for the national park as well, taped in here. Again, saving all of those little ephemera items, things that typically people throw away after a travel experience. I highly recommend keeping them because it really does bring the memory to life. All right, this next entry is probably my favorite, and if you have already seen the quick flip through of this journal or saw my interactive journaling video, you may already know what it is, but on the next day, we went to the Hall of Mosses, and I created this super fun interactive pop-up element that literally is just a stand of trees with all of the moss dangling from it. I think this is the most fun thing ever. I just love this part of this journal. And although it looks quite complicated, it really was pretty easy to do. And I have an entire tutorial here on my channel where I show you how to create pop-up elements like this in your own journaling. And in that video, I show you how to not only create the trees, but also this example of the butterfly pop-up elements. So if you're interested in learning how to make these, I will have that linked for you in the description and up in the cards. So this is my Hall of Mosses entry. As you can see, I did a really big title for this entry in black and white. And then I actually used some black washi tape with white alpha stickers over top of it to create this look of almost being cut out of the black in the page. And then another fun free thing that they offer at a lot of the national parks are these little stamps that they'll have at the visitor centers. So you can just bring some scrap paper with you and then stamp all over it with the different parts of the park and be able to use them in your journal later. So I just literally stamped this on the back of a receipt I had and then used it in my journal as the O in the Hall of Mosses as my way of putting the date on the page. This little banana slug here at the bottom is also one of the free stamps that you could use, so I cut that out and used it on the page as well. So many free elements that you can pick up along the way. And then again, a collage of photos that I created of all of the trees with the moss dripping off of them. When we turn the page, we then have the rest of our Hoh Rainforest experience. So I went ahead and created a little bulleted list of the trails that we went on because really all of the trails that we went on were pretty short overall, so we were able to hit quite a few. And then I have organized some of our photos from this experience. I really like having this extra long photo to really show the scale of the tree, and then next to it have this puffy tree sticker to represent that as well, with a little bit of journaling that says, "Whoa, these trees are truly giant." And you can see I have a little arrow pointing to the snake picture with a caption that says, "Ben always manages to find a snake." He's very into herpetology, so that is just a fact of every hike we go on. And I also have an arrow pointing to this photo to show that this is the Hoh River and explain in parentheses that it's pale blue because it's glacier runoff. So for this entry, it's a good example that you don't always have to do long form journaling. You can just create a bulleted list of the things you saw or did, create some little captions for your photos, and have an overall description of where you were. And that is enough. You don't have to describe every detail of the day to revisit those memories. And then a really cool element that you can incorporate in your journaling is when you get a map or a guide for the park or place that you are visiting, you can put that into your journal whole. Of course, you can always just cut out little elements. If you wanted to just cut out the little otter or cut out the title of Olympic, you can do that. But if you really like the look of a map whole and want to give a full picture, you can fold it up in a way that it can go into your journal and actually fold out. Now, one option would be to actually just put this in a pocket, and then you don't have to think about how to fold it for it to come out. But I really wanted to give a try at taping it in and then having it as an interactive element that actually folds out. So I had to refold the map to make this work, but basically I've arranged it in a way that I can now fold out the entire map. And I actually did it so that it would show the back of the map, because on the back of the Olympic map, it has the most beautiful illustration of all of the different animals that you'll see in Olympic Park. I mean, look how big this is. And also has the description of the coast and the forests and the mountains, which really represents the diversity that you experience in Olympic. So that is the side that I really wanted to showcase. But of course, you could fold it differently so that what you have fold out is actually the map itself. And you can see that the map is actually backwards in my journal. But if I was to flip the journal around, I could still see most of the map if I wanted to take a look at it. That is possible, but part of the map is literally glued to my page. So you can see here, this part of the back of the map is glued to my page so that it folds out and is able to be part of the journal itself. If you didn't want to do that though, you could just stick it in a pocket and then pull out the map, and then you can actually continue to use the map. But I really liked creating it in this way for this entry. So I just have to fold in the Olympic first, and then fold this down, and then this all should fold nicely in like so, and then this folds over top. And then we have, right, our map in here and able to fold out with the Olympic as the cover. So you just have to rework your folds a little bit to figure out how you can get it in such a way that it'll lay completely flat on the side you want, and then figure out what part of it needs to be glued down as the back for it to fold out in that way. When we turn the page, we have our transition from the rainforest to the coast, and you can see I again have my photos organized along the side this time. And this is a nice layout that you can do where you just put all of your photos in kind of a descending size order down your page, and then do your journaling on the other side. And as you can see, I put the title, this case, in the center of the page, and then just did my journaling around it. Very simple and easy. For me, titles are one of the most important aspects. I love to use hand lettering to really make it pop on the page and draw attention to it. So for this day, without even reading all of the journaling, I remember that this was our dinner at Collage. I think I'm saying that wrong. And a night at Cliff Edge Cabin, which was this really cool primeval cabin that I found like really far back into the forest, where we stayed a night. So we had our sleeping bags, as you can see, which luckily we already had packed with us for Rainier, which is why I wanted to have this experience. This was our sunset view at dinner, and then some photos of us from the morning taking in the view of the forest when we woke up. And then on this page, you can see I have my date again, and then the stamps that represent the different parts that we visited. So I have a photo of Solduce Falls and then the stamp for it. And then this fun element is literally just a cutout from the gift bag that they gave me when I bought the stickers. So I, of course, kept the bag that everything came in and used that in my journal as well. Every little thing that lays flat can be used in your journals. So definitely always keep a lookout when you're traveling for the gift bags from the visitor center. Look for guides and travel brochures, even napkins from the hotel that you're staying at. There are designs on so many things, and all of them can be used in your journaling. This next entry is a continuation of the 18th. Here I used my little library date stamp, and this entry is a nice look at using some negative space, but also making the entire entry almost an illustration in a way. I mean, just with this really basic, I mean, anybody can do this type of doodling, where I used a gelato, which if you're not familiar with them, they are by Faber-Castell and are basically kind of like a crayon that can interact with water. So you can just put it on your page. And then I like to use a baby wipe over it to just wash out some of the color. So that was my way of making this background effect that would represent the water. And then you can see I did some really just messy sketches with a Tombow brush marker of some rocks in the water, because that really is what is unique about the Pacific coast and the waters there, is just these big rock formations that end up in the ocean. And you can see the difference in the design of these pages. On this side, I did more of a vertical design. All of the photos are along the left side. And on this page, The design is having all of the photos along the top organized, kind of overlapping each other in a nice collage, and then putting my title for this experience in the center of the page using some alpha stickers. And it just says Escape to Wild Shores, which I really love the look of this. Very scrapbook style, but always having some journaling thrown in as well. And this is another example of more brief journaling, a bulleted list of the beaches that we visited, because there are so many beaches that you can stop at along the coast in Olympic National Park. And so what I did is, rather than write a long form explanation of everything, I just wrote the name of the beach or the place that we went, and then a quick description of what we saw. So for the Collage beach, I know I'm saying that wrong. I forget the correct pronunciation, but that was where the tree of life was, which you'll see on the next page. We also went to this big cedar tree, which my quick caption is that it was damaged, but still huge. Beach 4, which is where we saw tide pools with anemones, and Ruby Beach, which was the beautiful rocks, haystacks, and islands, and a very rugged tree-lined coast. I also wanted to mention that part of our day was also traveling, and I wanted to say that we drove through Forks, Washington, which left a lot to be desired. And then we also stopped for burritos and ate on the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and got to see sea otters. Again, just like a little note, this also happened, FYI, without going into lots of journaling. This would have sufficed as a description of this day, but there was one experience in this day that I wanted to dedicate additional space to, and that was visiting the Tree of Life, because this was a really sentimental moment for me. This is something that I was really looking forward to seeing, in part because my mom's necklace that I wear all the time is a Tree of Life necklace. It's one that I gave to her many, many, many Christmases ago, and she wore it all the time. And she literally asked me on her deathbed to continue wearing her necklace in her honor. And so that is what I continue to do. So it's a very important piece of jewelry for me. And so the opportunity to see the Tree of Life, which is this tree that is literally being divided between these two sections of the coast that are eroding away. And so you can see all of the roots exposed. It is so beautiful and neat to see, but is also ephemeral, because this is eventually going to erode away and fall into the ocean. And it was really special to be able to still see it as it still exists. And I was really happy for that experience. And so I have that documented in a little photo collage, and used some of my quote stickers again to say, you only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough. And so this page is really a reflection not only on the experience of visiting the Tree of Life, but also on my mom, and how this is something she would have loved to see as well. And it was definitely an emotional experience for me, because I know how much she would have enjoyed it, but I know she was there with me. And so I did a collage with some butterflies. That has always been her symbol for, remembering and honoring a past loved one. So I continue to do that as well, with the quote of, just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, it becomes a butterfly. And you can see that the background effect of this entry is actually using a really cool tree stencil that I have that gives you the inverted image of a tree. So then all of the gaps are where your ink goes. And so I think I used some Tombow brush markers and gelatos to make that effect. And then on the 19th, we traveled back to Port Ludlow, which is where our entire adventure started for beginning Mount Rainier. So it was really a full circle moment, and we got to revisit then the people who so kindly let us stay with them that night when we first got there, and was able to then share with them the entire trip and experience that we had. And we went to this place called Spruce Goose, which is a neat little cafe that is on a airstrip where all of these private planes land. And many of these private planes will go there literally just to get breakfast. I guess if you have private planes, you just travel all around to random little airstrips to grab breakfast and then head back home via plane. A different world, but really a cool thing to kind of get breakfast and an air show, as I mentioned here with my lettering. And you can see I actually did a little sketch of an airplane. This is not something I had a sticker for. And so when you don't have a sticker for something, always remember that you can draw it. Even if it's the messiest little doodle, it can really bring back a memory. And so I highly encourage you to put your artistic talents to the test and try making a little doodle. This was such a special final experience. And so I loved using this quote: "What seems ordinary is often the extraordinary," because even though breakfast at this cafe was probably one of the least adventurous parts of the trip, it was actually one of the most special. So I love having that documented here in my journal. And then we made our voyage to Seattle. We would be flying out, but we got to do a little bit of exploring of Seattle, which was nice because Ben spent quite a bit of time there for work at one point. So he was able to show me around a little bit. I have this really neat sticker that I got at a local cafe of a city and then mountains on the other side, which I thought was a nice representation of Seattle. And then I used the song lyric for Hello Seattle by Owl City, which goes, "Hello Seattle, I am a mountaineer in the hills and highlands," which was so perfect for this trip. Literally ending in Seattle and then saying, "I am a mountaineer," because I just climbed this epic mountain. And I have a little photo here of the sunset outside the airport window. So just a nice representation of how this trip came to a close. And of course, did my journaling, ending on the note that then it was time to head to the airport and watch the sunset on our incredible, unforgettable adventure. I hope that you enjoyed that peek into my travel experience in Olympic National Park and that it inspired you either to get out there and plan a trip for yourself or to document a trip you have already experienced in your own journal. If it did, do give the video a thumbs up and let me know down in the comments if you have a recent trip that you're really looking forward to documenting, or if you have one planned that you can't wait to go on. A big shout out and thank you to all of my patrons who make this possible. If you want even more content, definitely head over to my Patreon where you can join us for completely free and be part of our journaling community. And if you are looking for more travel journal inspiration, then I have good news because, as I mentioned, this is actually the continuation of a trip because the first half of our trip was exploring Mount Rainier National Park by actually summiting Mount Rainier. It was an epic adventure, and I have it all documented in here, which I shared with you in this video. So go ahead and click on this video to get a look at the entire trip and for more inspiration for your own travel journal. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.